Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys. It sound right, boys.
Right on, writers, and welcome first-time viewers to the Books by Adrian author platform, and this is our flagship show, Livestream Sunday. Welcome. I am your host, Adrian Santiago. Now that I've said host, I kick in the... One day I'll get it right. I am a YouTube content creator and an author. My debut novel, Mythic Shadow of the Spark, is in the editing phase now and will release later this year. I am projecting end of the year holiday season type dates, so we'll see. Depends on how quick the editing process goes and all of the rest. It is a murder mystery set in a sci-fi fantasy world, and it is the first book in a trilogy, possibly more epic series than that, who knows. If that sounds like something that you'd like to support and someday read, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That's the easiest way to support this project, and it's really all that I can ask of you. It's free to do. Just do it. Just click the thing. Only like half of you that watch this are subscribed, so click the thing. Help me out. And then if you're catching this on the replay or something, leave a like on the stream, of course, if you're watching this live. If you're watching on the rewatch, comment downstairs telling us about maybe a fairy tale or a myth that affected you as a writer. All right, let's see. So remember, subscribe. I already forgot to do all these things. Cool. Now, as far as leaving a comment on the stream here, whether it's now or on the replay, that puts you in for the comment of the week. There's always a comment of the week. Today's comment of the week comes from Clara Saint, who wrote, "Just dropped back to leave a thank you to Adrian, Kent, Colin, and the lovely Shannon. Jenna and Tyler weren't with us that day. This was fun and educational." This is in reference to the Tuber Book Club, where we did an interview with Kent Sean. And he, as you know well, he's just a font of knowledge. She went on to say, one little side note, both Kent and Shannon have incredible blue eyes. So leave a comment down below, and maybe I'll pick you for the comment of the week. I don't really have criteria for comment of the week. It's just, the comment that I like the best, or not even like the best, just the one that I think will be nice to share and everybody will enjoy, stuff like that. But, do whatever you want. Sign up for my newsletter. I send out newsletters and stuff, and I let you know what's going on and what's coming up. And if you want to stay up to date, join the newsletter. One chief complaint amongst my audience is that the YouTube notifications suck. And you're right, they do. They don't notify you quick enough. Sometimes they don't even notify you until well after the show is over. And that's no fun. You miss stuff. So, sign up for the newsletter. I'll be alerting you before the schedule goes up. I'll let everybody know what the schedule is. You can go to each video and set a reminder if you want, and you will never, ever, ever miss a show. It'll give you a 30-minute warning, and then it'll tell you when we go live. And that it'll do without fail. So do it. That'd be awesome. All right. Lastly, Tuber Book Club. We're currently reading Nightmare Tenant by Richard Holiday. We have those on Tuesdays. The next one is going to be on May 24th, where we will discuss prologue to chapter 13 of Nightmare Tenant by Richard Holiday. I already started reading. It's spooky, it's cool, it's dark, it's disturbing. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. And because it's a new book that we're doing on Tuber Book Club, there'll be a nice new opening credits sequence, right? And it'll be all spooky and stuff. It's going to be great. Our guest today is David Hopkins, the great and powerful David Hopkins. I can't wait to talk to this dude. Any questions for Mr. Hopkins, please label with a Q, and we will get to that in the third part of this show, which is the live chat Q&A. So stick around for that. Make sure that you stick around for that. Also, this is a very rare, very special back-to-back double feature live stream Sunday. So when we are done talking to Mr. Hopkins, we're going to be talking to Shelly Tagielski. The link that is currently pinned in the chat is that show. So when this one is done, go to that one. And we're going to keep the show rolling. We're going to keep the fun times coming. But we're going to kick it off with a bang with Mr. Hopkins here. I can't wait to talk to him. I'm going to tell you about one final thing, and that is to shop at my store. And I'm going to sum it up like this. That What the Hell Did I Just Redesign is for Miss Bethany Vota. So the coupon code is VOTAWSOME. Go check that out. Links are in the description downstairs. Enough for the business. Let's stop wasting time. Let's talk to our good friend, Mr. David Hopkins. He is the author of the Dryad's Crown series, a series I believe is coming to an end. If I remember correctly, I believe he's ending it soon. Let's find out. David Hopkins, how the hell are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome.
It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Let me put your name up here so people know who you are. There we go. All right. All right. And then everybody remember the links, as always, are downstairs. Mr. Hopkins, take the floor. Tell the people at home who you are, where you're from, and what you are currently working on, sir.
Yeah, my name's David Hopkins. I am a fantasy writer. I write epic fantasy. I just absolutely love Shakespeare, mythology, myth, folklore, fairy tales. It informs a lot of what I write. Right now, I'm working on The Dryad's Crown, which, as you said, it is wrapping up this year. I'm right now, book 5 is out. I'm working on book 6. And 7, 8, and 9 will come a little bit later this year, and that will be it for the Dryad's Crown series. There will be future books set in the world of Efre Uzel, but this actual story will wrap up with book 9, and then sometime next year we'll have the audiobook and the print version of it. Right now it's just available on ebook, but that'll all be coming next year. So yeah, it's been an exciting time.
Dude, I can't wait for those print versions because I'm a print guy. I love like holding a book and smelling the pages and stuff. It's all part of the experience of reading a book for me. I have a hard time reading on digital, so I can't wait to read your books in actual book form.
And I had the opposite experience where I was like, man, I'm gonna hate ebooks. Like I just was like, I can't get on ebooks, and I was like, I gotta have the print. But then I started reading on my Kindle, and all of that went away. And I was like, okay, I actually prefer. I'm really good at reading on ebooks. But it's funny because then it comes out, and people are like, well, when's the print copy of the book? And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah. People like
still want that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
people still want that experience. So what it does is it gives me an opportunity to go back and kind of polish everything up
Beautiful.
and resend it out into the world in a new form.
That's great, man. And that's something that I look forward to is all the different formats that the book comes out in: digital, print, hardcover. I can't wait for a really beautiful hardcover with like an embossed, like front cover, because you take the sleeve off and it's just, the cover. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun.
When this thing is done, it will be a chunk of a book. That's what I'll
bet 9 books, and I know that they're all, all kind of smaller and they add up, but like that's a big story, man. 9 books.
It'll be big. We've decided that chunk should actually be a category in the Hugo Awards.
Chunk.
You've got the novella and you've got novel, but you need like chunk. Like like you got the novel, but then you've got the novel,
Yeah, the bricks, right? Like the ones that you like drop on the table and everything bounces, like
that should be a whole other category.
Yeah. And I have a feeling that every one of my sequels will get bigger and bigger and heavier because I'm adding characters, I'm adding point. It's just going to get bigger. So by the 3rd one, I'm expecting like George Martin level nonsense. It's going to be awesome.
The
Let,
tale grows in the telling. That's how it works.
exactly, exactly. Which
Yeah.
is why I leave wiggle room these days. I'm not saying trilogy so much anymore. I'm
Yeah.
saying series because I don't know.
Well, I originally thought
I don't
Dryad's Crown
know.
was going to be 10 books, and
Oh, yeah.
I talked with my editor, and she was like, "This book right here could probably be a standalone later." And so we cut it off.
Oh,
And so what was 10, and I'm telling everyone it's going to be a 10-book series. And then very subtly, I just started telling people nine, nine.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so if anyone was like 10, I'm like, I never said 10. What are you talking about? It's always been 9
Fake
books.
news.
Yeah.
10. Let's
Who
say
would
hi
write?
to the chat real quick here. We got a whole bunch of people happy to see you. Cool Gamers here. What's up, dude?
Hey,
Coffee Create Connect was dropping us a like on her way through.
hey,
Richard, awesome. More importantly than that, Nightmare Tenant won the vote. Yeah, yeah, dude. He's still celebrating. He campaigned.
dude,
He
take that victory lap. It's fine.
he took it. He took like 3 laps. Yes, 2 episodes. It's
Yeah.
happening. It's happening. Yes, my T-shirt. Not this one. Oh, this one or the other one? Vote awesome. Yes. Good question. Does anyone write non-epic fantasy?
Yeah. I mean, urban fantasy, I guess, but it still can be it can feel epic. Yeah.
I do not rate books down if I don't like the smell, but I don't think I've ever smelled a book I didn't like.
Oh,
I've come full circle. I was a major ebook from 10 years ago. Now I'm actively rebuying everything in physical format. Yeah, and again, I do read. I'm reading Richard's novel as an ebook right now. I do it, but man, there's just nothing like the
well,
print.
and I do something that defies all common sense, which is if I listen to a book or I read on Kindle an ebook that I like, I'll
Yeah,
buy the physical copy of it. And it's like I already read the book or I've experienced the book, but it's like I just want that artifact on my shelf
yeah,
that's like, yes, that is a book that I like,
yeah.
even though I
Yes.
already read it in a different
There's
format.
it's there's a presentation to it. People walk into
Yeah,
your library or your office or whatever, and they can look at your shelf, and like it's different. Like nobody's gonna be
yeah,
scrolling through your phone or through your Kindle. They're gonna look at your shelves,
yeah.
and that's where it's all at. All right, let's get into the topic of the day because I'm really excited about it. Let's go. All right. Sorry, I'm really excited. So, you describe your literary contribution as a fantasy story that explores family dynamics in a tender and powerful way. In my experience, I try to write in a way where I'm bringing something I feel is otherwise lacking in whatever genre it is that I'm writing or in popular culture, etc. Did you feel like fantasies weren't exploring those family dynamics and you knew what you could bring? Or are you inspired by family driven fantasies and long to add your own 2 cents to the list? What was the dynamic there for you?
I feel like with a lot of fiction, and this is not just fantasy, but anytime something is supposed to be family or about family, it ends up being a shorthand for just toxic and hostile. And it's like for instance, the Fantastic Four. It's like, well, what is the Fantastic Four? Where it's superheroes, but they're a family of superheroes. But how did Stanley write it? Where they were all trying to like kill each other
Yeah, they were,
constantly
yeah, at the very least, they were bickering, but most of the time, like, they were fighting
all
each
the
other.
time. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Families fight, but they don't just fight. Like
Yeah,
sometimes families can be really like great.
yeah,
Like sometimes, and so I feel like every family dynamic has been turned up to 11. It's all like King Lear, where everyone's dead at the end of it. And I felt like I wanted to tell a family dynamic that felt like the family experience that I've had,
yeah.
which is
A
which
familiar family, the way, and again, that can include the occasional bickering, especially
yeah.
between siblings, for example, and husbands and wives. But ultimately, man, like a good, solid, healthy family, like it's mostly good times, man. Like
Yeah, same team.
I have very, very few complaints. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
uh, um, you know, we're. I mentioned in the green room that this is a temporary setup for us. We had to move. Our lease was up. We were gonna go month to month until we could find something, but our landlords were switching everything from rentals to owning, and so they were kicking all the rentals out when their leases were up, and they were moving in owners, and so we had to go. We didn't have a choice, but we're in a college town. Our lease was up in what was it, in March? No, sorry, in the beginning of May, end of April. They don't have, there's no apartments available until August. Like, that's when apartments become available around here, or houses or whatever become available around here in a college town. So we have 3 months where we're like, where are we gonna live? I moved my family of four into a one bedroom condo to
Do not
to
envy
get
that.
just to get us
Yeah.
through these 3 months to so we can get back into a nice comfortable 3 bedroom, yada yada. But like, I wouldn't be able to do that if I had some insane family that was fighting and throwing punches all the time. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we're locked in close here. It, but we love each other. Like, everything's cool. We're gonna be fine.
Yeah, and I like to see a little bit more of that. Now, that being said, in the Dryad's Crown, there is sort of a wicked stepmother type figure,
Oh, you gotta
and
have
she's
one. It's fairy tales, right?
exactly. And so we do have that, but it's not just that. Like, I think the mother-daughter dynamic between the main character and her child, like, to me, it feels like sort of a we bicker, but when it comes to the big stuff, we are a united front.
Yeah.
And I feel like, she kind of discovers her family, things crumble, and then she discovers her family over the course of the story. And it, by and large, yeah, I feel like we could have more of that. Everything becomes
Mm.
so just you mentioned Game of Thrones earlier. Like, Game of Thrones, it's politics disguised as family, but
Yeah.
it's not family.
No, it's politics. It's totally politics. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course. It's in the title, Game of
yeah,
Thrones, right? Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely, absolutely. Man, so like, cause I think of a lot of fairy tales and myths, and like you're, as you say, it's these very toxic and these families that are at odds with each other all the time. It must be really refreshing to put something out there with a more as you say, realistic family dynamic, something more akin to what you've experienced. What then, besides the wicked stepmother, I'm guessing, is the whole like, where does the maleficence come from?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, because what you have, the Dryad's Crown is essentially a story about, a child of promise, a fey child, a true fey child, a unique and precious gift that, like in so many fairy tales, the child gets sort of thrown down the river, both
Mm,
figuratively and literally. And
yeah.
and there's always that idea of, like, the child does not get raised by the person that was supposed to raise the child, and it gets passed around, and it ends up with the worst possible mom. And what happens when a dryad, a creature of the forest, grows up in the city? And so she is a forest creature living in the city, and her real arc is coming back. It's figuring out who she is, what she's supposed to do. It's all the common tropes, but yeah, I mean, she deals with the wicked stepmother,
Hmm.
and we even later in the book introduce sort of the big bad wolf, which becomes this
Right.
archetypal, chaotic force of destruction that she has to contend with. And so, yeah, there's never a shortage of antagonism when you
Yeah.
have someone, particularly in fairy tales.
Yeah.
There's never a shortage of things in the dark and scary places that want to come out and get you.
We were talking recently on another episode about doing something like an author tube event where we all write maybe some fairy tale retellings.
Yeah.
Or maybe we pick one that's the theme, and everybody rewrites that same one their own way, and you see all the different versions of what you could have gotten. And the first one that people throw out is Robin Hood. And I find that really interesting because Robin Hood has been done to death in a way that I think people are very sick of, at least in movies. Every new Robin Hood movie does more poorly than the last because everybody's like, I've seen that a million times. Why do I want to watch that again? But then that's therein lies the challenge, right? Is to
Yeah.
take that particular archetype, that particular fairy tale story, and just do something really new and fresh with it and change it in a big way.
Well,
That
and
would be an
even
interesting challenge.
yeah, even with something like Robin Hood, I mean, when you're talking about folklore, you've got Robin Hood and you've got King Arthur. Did they really exist as historical figures? Are they completely manufactured? Is it sort of a category of storytelling? You're going to tell a Robin Hood story or tell
Mm,
a Arthur story. But I think the thing that really got people is Hollywood looks at Robin Hood and Arthur and goes, okay, these are known quantities that are completely public domain. So to them, it seems like a no-brainer, but what
mm.
they forget is there's not really there are people who are fans of Robin Hood and fans of King Arthur, but not the same way that people are fans of X-Men
Or Star Wars
or
or
Star
something. Yeah,
Wars.
yeah, yeah. Like
And
it's
so
not the same.
and so I think your best chance to tell, and this is just my own opinion, but I think the best chance to tell a Robin Hood story is really to tell the story of a witty, down on their luck scoundrel hero. So someone like Han Solo.
I was just gonna say that, yeah.
Yeah,
Or an
people
indie
can't
or something.
Yeah, people can't get enough of Han Solo because it's a great character, but Han Solo is essentially a Robin Hood type figure.
Mm.
His band of merry men. And it's the
Yeah,
people living
yeah.
in the woods and they're sticking it to the man and there's some fun in that.
Mm.
But I think the classic Robin Hood story, I don't know if it has the same sort of value that say like a Marvel movie does.
Firefly is coming to mind with what you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
Robin Hood and his merry men. That's Mal and his crew. Very
Yeah,
much so.
exactly.
Very much so. Richard says that he could do a subversion of Robin Hood where he steals from the poor to give to the rich. And I thought that the best idea that they talked themselves out of was when they, before, the Russell Crowe Robin Hood movie,
Mhm.
before he came on the project, the original plan for that movie was to tell a story from the perspective of the sheriff. He was
Oh,
the hero of the story, and Robin Hood was this menace that was causing all kinds of trouble for him, and it was going to be a subversion that way. But as soon as they cast Russell Crowe, it's everything
yeah.
switched, and now it's a Robin Hood story that we've seen a million times again. So I always thought that was a missed opportunity. Like that sounds like a really great premise. Is the sheriff is the protagonist, and Robin Hood is just a pain in the ass.
It would be interesting because you've got a sheriff who's basically trying to like institute unpopular reforms in order to keep everything together. And then
Taking
along comes,
orders from a tyrant. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like it's not even ultimately his fault if you wanted to write him that way. Like most people write him very like, darkly evil. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like but if you write him the right way, he's answering to his superior. Prince John is the dick here, not him.
Yeah, and then along comes this guy who's like messing up all of his incremental progress that
Yeah,
he's trying to
shooting
make.
people up with arrows and stealing their stuff. Like he's a menace.
Like, dude, I'm just collecting taxes so you guys can have roads.
I'm
You
doing my
just killed
job.
my guy.
Yeah, like he's dead. He had a family.
I can't just let that go, man. I've got to lock you up. And why are
uh,
you dressing up like a woman? Like, you think I can't see through that disguise?
Often they don't. He
But that
goes
would be
real
funny if
Bugs Bunny with it.
it would be so funny if like this Robin Hood character is just trying to have these clever schemes to trick the sheriff, and it's like, what are you
Yeah,
doing?
what if he was just it's just obvious, like knock it off, man. Like I see you. You're right there.
Yeah.
Well, this topic will permeate the rest of the episode. Let's dive into the interview cuz I want to pick your brain.
All right.
All right, so what's the best Hollywood story that your Uncle Anthony ever told at the family dinner?
You know what? I'm not related to Anthony Hopkins,
I don't believe
but
you.
I do have a Hollywood connection. So
Ooh. Okay.
my cousin is Annalise McNeil, and she wrote for the Fresh Beat Band and Blues Clues.
Awesome.
So there we go. It's so funny
Very
though
cool.
because like my parents like forget that like I have this cousin who's this amazing writer who's like really doing well for herself. and they're like, I don't know, maybe you could help Annalise with some pointers and something. Like, she's fine.
She's
Like,
doing all right.
she's
She'll be
good.
fine.
Like maybe I
How
could get
about
some pointers.
yeah?
Yeah.
How about sending some pointers our way? Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, no, Annalise is my cousin, and she is so cool. I miss her dearly. She's in California. I haven't seen her in a long time, but no, she's my Hollywood connection because she actually,
That's pretty cool.
she's in it. Fresh Beat Band, Blues Clues, some iconic properties here for
Absolutely. Blue's
kids.
Clues alone is a claim to fame. Like
Oh
that's
yeah,
huge. That's
yeah,
huge.
love it. So. Um,
Right
but
on.
yeah,
Right
and
on.
then I have friends that are doing stuff. My friend Amy Talkington, she wrote a wonderful movie called Night of the White Pants, and so there's my other connection. She's not
Interesting.
family, but I would happily be her younger brother if she would let me.
You know that singer Mark Anthony?
Mhm.
He's in my family tree somewhere. He's like an
There you go.
aunt is married to an uncle or something, and like it all leads back. I don't know him. I can't get your tickets, but he's in the family tree somewhere. Uh, so storytelling seems to have entered you at a really early age with Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So what was it that clicked with you about the game and the craft in that combination?
I think some people who play Dungeons and Dragons, it's very hard for them to figure out that you can literally do anything in Dungeons and Dragons. And I picked up on that immediately, so
Mm,
much so that I probably drove the people running the game a little bit crazy
the Dungeon Master.
because I was like, oh, I can do like this is amazing. Like this was open world before we had really open world video games. And so I'm
That's a
just
good way
wanting
to look at it. Yeah.
and so I'm just, and what it did was it created space for me to tell a story with my character. And that became a lot of fun for me because the great thing about D&D is you can play D&D in your head when you're at work. Like you're not even playing the game, but you're just thinking about your character. You're
Yeah,
just thinking about,
what choices he's gonna make, or
yeah.
yeah, all that stuff. Interesting.
And so I absolutely got into that. The other thing that I really liked about it when I was younger, D&D was like gamified homework. And so
Mm.
you had these rule books, and they were like thick rule books. And I love just digging through that stuff and figuring out, okay, my character can carry this many pounds of gold and like of equipment, and I can buy this spyglass for this much money. And there's a rule here about, and I really enjoyed, like I would read those rule books cover to cover,
Yeah,
and that for me was a lot of fun. And I think it paid off when it came time to start building worlds in fantasy
I'll bet it did.
because I'm
Yeah.
like, well, this world has a religious system. It has a faith system, and that faith system affects how people operate. And how would a people in a world like the one that I'm wanting to tell, how would they worship? What would the gods be like?
Mm.
And it even created ideas where it's like for instance, I'm really tired of the sort of evil Catholic analog. Like so many fantasy novels have sort of this evil, oppressive religious authority,
Mm.
and it sort of mirrors how they imagined the Catholic Church in the medieval days.
Mm.
And I'm like, I actually like people being like, you know what? I pursued religion because I just want to help people and I care about people. And so I have a far more sympathetic faith system that's not like it's not about oppression. It's very much sort of an idealized, like the people are trying their best. They're just trying to get through the day, and there's something about that system which honestly I think that came through D&D because it was this idea of I don't have to retell the way everyone else has been doing it. I can come up with something completely different if I want.
It sounds to me from the way that you talk about it like the rules and structure of it all was really really important to you
Yeah.
because it allowed you to find the areas in which to play in between. How do you then, did you bring that to your books is my question, is what I'm saying. Like, do you have these sort of rules and structures that you set up in order to create room in which to play?
Yeah, because I mean the very best D&D game is when the rules are there but you're not referencing them because it's all in the background.
Yeah.
You're just telling the story, you're doing the things, but you're not bogged down with the rules. And so even when I'm writing, I try to keep the rules in the background. I try to keep them so that you're not seeing them, but
Right.
they're there. I think the real challenge, though, is if you are familiar with gaming, is you don't want to tell a story that feels like big boss, bigger boss, biggest boss, and the book
Mm,
ends when you are 20th level and you've killed the biggest boss and you got the gold. Like, and it's fine if you tell a story like that, but I don't want to tell a story that feels like it was a game. I don't want a fight that feels like the character has a pile of hit points that they have to go through before they actually die.
mm.
Like the in D&D, you get stabbed, it's 1d4 of damage. In the real world, if you get stabbed, you're going to the hospital.
Yeah.
Like,
You're bleeding out. You better get to the hospital
you're
immediately.
like, okay, I'm done. Fight's over. You
Yep.
just stabbed
I
me.
You
I'm
stabbed me,
peace.
I lost.
Yeah,
Fight's over. Exactly. Fight's
it was
over.
real easy. And so I really tried to say, okay, what does real combat look like
Mm,
versus like D&D combat? Because that it's gamified. But
yeah.
yeah, I don't want to feel
So
like
there are parts of it that you have to kind of set aside and like
yeah,
take more realistic approach and other ways that you can hold on to that old way of doing it through D&D.
yeah, you're not just trading hits in a fight. You're getting whatever hits you can take, and so yeah, figuring that stuff out I think was fun, and then also trying to figure out how you're not following some of the game tropes where everything is about just fighting and killing the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's why I love open world games as much as I do. You know, the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is so open that you
Absolutely.
can play it any way you want. You can play the story, it's all right there, but you can just choose not to and have
Yeah.
adventures out in the wild, and it's perfectly fine. And I love that kind of freedom. It's why I write the kind of stories that I do. I have trouble writing short stories or flash fiction because everything just wants to get bigger and more, open. I wanted to go back to you were talking about, like incorporating the religion aspect into the story and stuff like that. And it's interesting because, I had the same sort of observation about the way that religion is typically handled in stories where it has that heavy, like, Catholic regime kind of thing to it. And I wanted to do something different. And I always look to, the Neil Gaimans and the George R. R. Martins and the way that they do religion or supernatural elements in in their books and their stories. And one of the things that I tried to do with mine was uh, putting it through my lens and what I know. I grew up in a Christian church, but we were Pentecostal. But my high school girlfriend was Baptist, so I visited Baptist churches and I visited Methodist churches, and there are so many different sects to the Christian religion, and that's something that I wanted to kind of play with in mind. So even though there is a sort of universally accepted kind of deity that my characters believe in, everybody sort of worships in different ways or follows different rules that they've interpreted through their study or whatever it is. So like you have all these people that all seemingly worship the same god or goddess in this case, but they can't seem to agree on anything. Just like Christians can't seem to agree on how it all actually plays out, and that's why we have so many different ones.
Yeah.
That was something that I wanted to play with,
Well,
and I found
yeah,
that really fun.
and I like, at least with the world that I'm creating, like you could have a disagreement about a god and be like you could have a
Such a
disagreement about a
dork.
god, and in some settings it's like, okay, we're going to come to blows and there are going to be wars waged about this, but it doesn't have to be that way. In the world that I've built, there might be a disagreement about a god and the response is, eh, who
Mm-hmm.
knows, like
Yeah. Eh.
we don't know. They're mysterious, inscrutable. They're many, and they I guess we'll never know. And there is that idea of we just kind of assume that the world is filled with miracles. It's filled with wonder, and we'll never quite figure it out. But this is the best that we're. This is the best that we're going on. Your mileage may vary, and and that is a completely valid expression of faith, versus people who are like, this is the only way that we can interpret it, and
Yeah.
we're gonna fight it out. And even you see in George R. R. Martin's religions, like,
Mm-hmm.
man, those people can get pretty hardcore
They'll
about.
get into it. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not my setting. And I do like the idea that you mentioned where, what about the different expressions within a similar religion? Like
Right.
it's like we all worship the Taraki, the god of agriculture, but your practice is very different than mine.
Mm, that's a it's a real clever way to put it.
Yeah.
That's a real clever way to put it. Um, Believe what you want to believe. Amazing. That mindset is a fantasy idea.
Yeah.
Richard, sometimes you really nail it. What did reading The Dark Tower by Stephen King teach you about fantasy epics? Because that is a very unique piece of work and a very unique
Yeah.
experience reading it.
Stephen King for me was formative, and it wasn't just because I read Stephen King, it was because of the age when I read Stephen King. My parents were of the mindset that as long as I was reading, it was probably a good thing. And so
Good. It's
I could
healthy.
go to the bookstore and I'd be like, "Ooh, I want that book." And they'd be like, "All right, I'll get it." And so my parents, when I was like in junior high, were giving me all this Stephen King to read, and I was just plowing through it. And I'm like, seventh grade reading The Shining, reading Cujo,
Jeez.
Misery, like all these books. But I will say,
Misery.
I know I was
Jesus.
so young, and I'm like reading these books, and man, like a baby duck, I just imprinted on me. But
I
the
mean,
thing
they all pale in comparison to Dark Tower, I think. There's
I
something really, really different about Dark Tower.
I think that's it. I don't know if I would use the word better because they're all different and it's all
Right.
Stephen King, but it's different. And I think the thing that really stuck with me is that Stephen King really explored just how weird fantasy can get.
Mm.
Like, and I think that sometimes, and I fall into this too, when we're writing sort of vaguely European style fantasy epics, we kind of fall into some very basic tropes. And I feel like Stephen King kind of threw all that off the table and was like, all right, we're gonna get weird and we're gonna get kind of bizarre and creepy with this, and it's gonna be just an absolute like hot mess, but in all the
Yeah.
good ways. And I wish I had a drop of that because at times when I'm writing, I'm like, okay, am I being too safe with my fantasy here?
Mm.
Am I following this path? Because I could go off in a direction. I could take it somewhere else. And I think Stephen King, for whatever reason, I just don't think he played it safe with the Dark Tower.
Yeah,
Um,
he took some big swings. He took
yeah,
some big swings for sure. And you got to respect the hell out of that because you're right. I do that too where I'm writing a sci-fi fantasy and I have magical elements, but I'm always trying to like, okay, I got to keep myself grounded in reality here. It has to make sense. It has to like, follow the rules, yada yada. And of course, all that is true. I'm not doing anything wrong. But when I read something like Saga, for example, I don't know if you've read it,
so good. I've got all 9 of the books back here.
he is not holding back anything in that series. He does everything he wants to do in that series, and it's amazing. So,
Yeah.
and then you have your Neil Gaimans too that do that too. Like when you read The Sandman, there's no holding back at all in The Sandman. That dude takes fantasy to the 11. So
Well,
you got to respect that.
and they create this world where it's like, okay, I'm going to present things to you, but I'm not going to necessarily explain everything to you. Like, I love how early on in Saga we have some character that's got a TV for a head, and there's no real
Yeah.
unpacking the
Isn't he
culture.
like a prince? If I remember correctly, he's like a
Yeah.
prince or something. He's got a TV for a head.
Yeah, and I feel like Sandman did the same thing where it became sort of this world where he's like, okay, now I can tell any story
Yeah.
because I've opened up this world that allows me to play with it. And I think that's just so great. I even
Yeah.
in the Dryad's Crown the in book 1, the main character when she's a baby, she turns into a fish and slips out of this person's hands and falls into the river and is discovered several years later.
Hmm.
Um, but like I don't go into much detail on why she turned into a fish. Is this part of her power set? Is this a common thing? And like it's fairy tale logic. She turned
Yeah.
into a fish. Why did
Princess
she
and the
turn it?
Frog, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Why? can we unpack the whole fish thing? No, you're just going to have to accept it and move on. And that's what's so great about fantasy is you can present something to people that's absolutely insane and just be like, I am sorry, reader, but you're just going to have to be okay with this because we're moving on. Like we're going down the road. Like you're still worried about this thing,
Yeah.
and I've got this to tell. And what I have found with all my readers is no one's had a problem with her turning into a fish. Not one. No one complained.
You know what it is? It's because of the underrated masterpiece, The Sword in the Stone. It prepared all of us for characters turning into animals to learn a lesson, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, oh, yeah, of course this happens. And
Excuse
I
me.
think that's like, and I thought you mentioned Saga, Sandman, Dark Tower. They all fit in that category of
Hmm.
I don't have to explain everything to
Yeah,
you.
I can just
It's
do this and you can just deal with it.
have fun.
Have
Yeah,
fun. Yeah. Enjoy how twisted this is going to be because that it's going to be twisted. Here we go. Dark Tower, page 1.
yeah.
Yeah, man, for sure. Now, we're talking about comics with Sandman and Saga and all that. Before honing your craft as a journalist, you pursued a career in comic books. What did
Yes.
your time in comic books bring to your development as a storyteller? That is what challenges unique to comics helped you with the craft of writing in general.
I mean, I think, and this is debatable. We could talk all day about this, but I think at the end of the day, comics, it's an artist's medium. Now, those artists can be amazing storytellers, but if you are a writer trying to work with artists, um, it's always going to be a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the bottom. I mean, if you're working at Marvel or DC, where the artists are getting paid uh, a decent page rate for the work that they do, that's one thing. But if you are a writer being like, here, I wrote 120 pages and I would like you to illustrate all, like that might be
Mm.
the next year or so of their life.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
what you spent a month writing could take up, 7, 10 times more time on the artist's end. And so what I ended up doing with a lot of my comics, I might have 7 different projects going at any given time with different artists working at different stages. Now, the good thing is that I had been published before,
Hmm.
which meant that artists wanted to work with me because they knew there was a good chance that they would get their stuff in print and in the stores.
Mm.
And so they're like, okay, David's been published, so we can work with him because I want to get my stuff in the stores. The other thing is generally I was a pretty chill person to work with. People liked working with me, which it sounds like I'm bragging, and I am, but that is like that is a
It's a good brag.
survival skill.
That's a good brag, though. When people want to work with you because you're good to work with,
Yeah.
that's the kind of bragging we like around
Well, and that's the
here.
thing is because if you're going to work on this comic book project,
Yeah.
you don't want to work with an asshole. And like that was the thing is I one of the greatest compliments I ever got was from an artist who said, I never would have finished this graphic novel if it
Mm.
wasn't for you. Because it wasn't just here's the script, good luck. I was
Right.
checking in on him. I was like, and
Giving
not
guidance along the way, feedback and all that, helping him
yeah,
out.
encouragement, just reminding him like, hey man, once it's done, it'll always be out there. People will always be, and this is something that you want to do, and it's gonna be so great. And so like that kind of encouragement, like
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to be as a comic book writer, was someone who the artist wanted to work with because they didn't need me. Like they could have written their own thing and they'd been fine without me.
Yeah.
But I will say that at a certain point it became really difficult because um, your fortune was completely tied to the artist you were working with. And at a certain point, I was like, I just want to write a novel. Like, I just want to write my own thing. And the
Mm.
funny thing is the Dryad's Crown that I'm working on, it's an illustrated novel. I'm working with an artist, and there will be, when the whole thing is done, there will be about 11 full-page illustrations that are in the book. And so
Nice.
even when I'm not writing comics, I'm still working with an artist.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you were saying that comics is an artist medium. Excuse me. And I agree because as you say, if you want to be a writer that writes a script and hands it over to an artist, okay, fine, like that, they're gonna do it, and you're gonna have a comic. But some of the best graphic novels are either the artist wrote it along with drawing it, or the writer and the artist were a complete collaboration the entire time, like your
Yeah.
Watchmen with Dave Gibbons putting just as much into that
Oh,
as Alan
absolutely.
Moore did. It wasn't just about the story that Alan Moore was putting out there, but that comic book was originally designed to be unfilmable because it was meant to be the pinnacle of comics, right? It
Mhm.
had the nine, grid format, and it played with that. It had symmetry from its covers to its first image to the last image. The first page and the last page of each issue were always like, chiral versions of each other. Like they did some wild stuff in there.
Yeah,
And that's not something that Alan Moore could have simply wrote into a script and handed it off to just anybody. That
absolutely.
was a collaboration between writer and artist, and that's the only way for it to be, Watchmen or
Oh, absolutely. And I
and then your
think
Frank Millers, for example. Sorry.
and good writers will admit it. Like they're like, yeah, absolutely, this is absolutely that. And even
Of
the
course.
artist that I'm working with in the Dryad's Crown, Daniel Desenna, is an absolute mad genius. The guy is so incredibly talented that even though he's not illustrating every single page,
Sure.
those illustrations, they inspire me. Like I
Mm,
see it and it helps me with my writing because now I'm getting this very dramatic image that I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be like I get excited for the book as well. And so I kind of become a fan of my own book, not because of my stuff, but because of what he's bringing to it. And so that is
I know what you
invaluable
mean.
to me. So invaluable. Like, when you see that cover, you see that illustration, and you're just like, that's it. and and
I
and
can't wait
that's
to see those because
powerful.
you see them in, like, for example, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the Dunk and Egg novellas that George Martin puts out between Game of Thrones books. In those he always has an artist do one or two, really nice like sketch portraits that he
Yeah.
puts up in there, and they're just beautiful. And I want to put something like that in my. I don't know if I have the money or the time, but would love to do something like that. That sounds awesome.
Well, and it was really cool talking with Daniel because one of the things that was a real inspiration for both of us was the Bernie Wrightson illustrations that appeared in The Stand by Stephen
Mm,
King.
yeah,
Like that was something that he was like, I love these illustrations that appear in The Stand, and I was like, yeah, that's it right there. And I even remember like The Dark Tower had these beautiful illustrations in it, and those things I fantasy illustration is I'm a huge nerd about fantasy illustration, and it I for my first major work in the genre, I couldn't imagine not having some illustrated components to it.
yeah. You see it sometimes in like reprintings of Lord of the Rings and stuff. Where they'll put in some of those, and it just elevates that book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It only adds to it. Would you ever return to comics? Did you have any big ideas that you never got to do and you might want to go back to?
It's funny because I think in some ways, me working as a writer in the world of novels, it
Mm-hmm.
may be another backdoor to return to comics because I've seen a lot of writers who will make their journey back. Like V.E. Schwab is doing comics, and
Mm.
Rainbow Rowell she's running She-Hulk right now, and it's amazing. And there's a lot of like prose novelists out there who are working in comics. And I
That
will tell
sounds
you
cool.
right now, Marvel, you know how to reach me. I've
Yeah, they're
I
watching. They're
yeah,
watching
yeah.
this show.
You got my number, right? My email. But no, I would love to. I would love to write comics someday. It's just that as an indie author, writing indie comics takes so much energy that I'm gonna. If I ever do comics again, it'll have to be with a company that
Mm,
is managing a lot of that stuff because so much of my energy is going to the books that I just don't know if I have the energy to do indie in both fields. Like
yeah.
one has to be a little bit more corporate, and the other
Mm.
one has to be a little bit more me.
Yeah, especially if you're writing for something like Marvel, for example, where you're part of a moving train when you hop
Yes.
onto something like that, and you got to play by the rules. Like we
Yeah.
were saying earlier, coming full circle, playing by the rules, but finding the areas in between in which to play. That's the challenge of doing those those big ones TV writers and stuff talk about that. Like they'll come onto a show to write a script for an episode or something. They have all these rules that they have to follow, but then it's in the in between that you find the magic.
Well, you're essentially a curator for the property. It's
Mm-hmm.
you need to take care of it,
Mm-hmm.
preserve it, and then pass it on to the next generation.
Add to it and pass it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Add something. Add your little something to it within the context of that story, and then move on.
Well,
Yeah.
and the best versions of any Marvel comic that I've read, because I'm more in Marvel than DC,
Same.
is is they get the character. Like Rainbow Rowell, I highly recommend her She-Hulk series. It feels like a She-Hulk comic, and it
Nice.
doesn't feel like she's like, well, we're just gonna change everything.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like,
Fresh
no,
take. Like no.
the character's not broken. The character is exactly what she needs to be, and you found the thing that makes her work, and
hmm
you elevated that into a way that just makes it such a fun read.
The real beautiful thing about those long running Marvel and DC characters is that they've been through so many eras and so many changes that you can always pick and choose the aspects of them that you like the best and mold them into your own version, and you're still consistent with what came before, and yet you're doing something fresh and you there's always little ways to do it that way, I feel like.
Yeah. Now that being said, I don't know if I would ever take something like the Dryad's Crown and try to
Mm.
adapt it into comics. I just
Mm.
feel like it's kind of in the form that I wanted to write it in. Um, but yeah, with some of the other properties that are out there, yeah, I absolutely would return to comics at some point. But I don't know. I loved working in comics. I mean, for the time that I was in it, I met some amazingly talented people, and I was very
I'll
fortunate
bet.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bet there's a lot of great talent working in comics. I understand that it's really hard to work in comics these days, but there's a lot of great talent in there these days.
Yeah.
Now you're writing novels now. Where do you see this fantasy genre going in the future? You know, especially now that you're here writing stories. You know, you're talking about these sort of reimaginings that are really interesting. Where do you see it all going?
It's really interesting because I think right now fantasy is being defined by really probably uh, two names in particular. Um, I may be missing one, but I think that everyone's looking for the next Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when the bubble bursts, like we're experiencing kind of a good moment in fantasy. I think when the bubble pops is going to be that moment when Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, when they all give up looking for the
Mm.
next Game of Thrones. At a certain point, they're going to be
Mm.
like, we tried this, it didn't work. There is no new Game of Thrones. We're done. Moving on to the next well, whatever, the next Dune,
Yeah.
the next this, the next that. I think that there's going to be a bubble there. So one name is George R. R. Martin, and I think the other name is Brandon Sanderson. I think that those are kind of the two big names.
Mm.
And I think Sanderson's work is an example of what might be the healthy progression of the genre, which is a little bit more authorial control, kind of a hybrid between indie and traditionally published, you know, dedicated fan bases that are sort of participating in the discussion, authors who are readily available to answer questions and engage with their audience. And I think that our best possible future will be one where people are looking at Brandon Sanderson's model. I think the worst possible future would be the one where we're trying to do the next Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Man, dude, it's so easy to talk to you that this hour has completely blown by. I had
Where
no
to go?
idea that it was already almost 5. So we're gonna throw Richard's 2 questions up here
Great.
for the third segment, and then unfortunately we have to wrap this up. Like I had so much more I wanted to talk to you about.
Dude, I'll
Now, Richard and I were a part of a spirited discussion recently on trigger warnings, and I feel like he's trying to start some shit. So, so trigger warnings are, in your opinion, Yay or nay?
I am going to say nay. I don't think trigger warnings are necessary. However, I
Yeah.
do think book ratings are not a bad idea. So if I
Mm.
tell you that my book is PG-13,
Mm.
at that point you can kind of proceed with caution
Yes.
because there might be stuff in it that is triggering,
Right.
but
There's
at least you're
usually a little list under the ratings, right? That tells you the
eh,
general kind of themes that are going to be explored that are more adult or whatever.
yeah.
And in that way, you don't have to list trigger warnings, but you can still warn people, hey, this is a very mature book. We're going to talk about very mature things. It's going to get heavy, it's going to get dark. Or hey, this one's for everybody. Read it to your kids. Great.
Well, and
Book ratings.
and I have a really great friend, a guy named Chris Williams, who I'm going to misquote him here, but on TikTok he said that it's really up to the reader to kind of um, sort of whatever their traumas are, whatever they're dealing with, to really kind of do the research.
Yeah.
And there's no shortage of research out there where you can find out, okay, is this book a book that would be safe for me?
Right. Well, David, unfortunately, that's gonna do it for us today, man.
Oh man,
We have another show that I have to switch over to and get to.
I will
We
happily step aside for your next guest because she sounds awesome.
Well, she's gonna be a very interesting chat for sure. So stick
Great.
around for that. I agree too. It's a really great idea. We're gonna do that. I'm gonna put a rating, even though there's no like official book ratings. I'm just gonna slap one on my book anyway.
You could just
Um,
say this one is for
yeah,
very
mature
mature
audiences,
adults.
dark themes, violence. Read at your own risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I like that. I don't want to spoil what's in the book, but that's a nice way of like warning people. All right. Go ahead and say goodbye to everybody at home. Let them know what you have coming up down the pipeline, and we're gonna have you back real soon for on next season because we got to talk some more. So go ahead and
Awesome.
tell the
Awesome.
folks what's up.
Yeah, anything related to me, you can check me out at thatdavidhopkins.com. Thatdavidhopkins.com will have links to all my books, everything I've got coming out. Book 6 of The Dryad's Crown is coming out this summer, but you can start reading books 1 through 5 right now. No one's stopping you. So those are what's there, and that's what's coming up.